Imagine a castle. What do you see? Perhaps turrets scraping the clouds, sunlight gilding banners that flutter in the wind, a young princess leaning from a balcony with roses in her hair. The scene glimmers like the illustrations in children's books, warm, clean, and impossibly romantic. It is a vision we have inherited from storybooks and films, the happily ever after world of medieval royalty. But now, erase it, because that world never truly existed. The truth of a medieval princess's life, particularly between the years 1200 and 1400, was not one of golden gowns, leisurely walks in perfumed gardens, or carefree laughter drifting through candlelit halls. It was a life defined by duty, discomfort, and danger. It was not a crown placed gently on the head of a beloved daughter. It was a yoke strapped tightly to her shoulders, one she could never shrug off. So let us step into her chamber. Let us wake with her on an ordinary morning and see, with unflinching eyes, what her existence was really like. The air is cold, not the playful chill of autumn mornings, but a bone-deep, damp cold that clings to everything. The chamber walls, built of stone, breathe out the night's frost as though the castle itself were alive and hostile to human warmth. A fire smoulders low in the hearth, hardly able to fight against the draughts sneaking through arrow slits disguised. As windows, you, the princess, lie on a bed draped in heavy woolen blankets. Not silk, not velvet, wool, scratchy and rough against bare skin. The straw mattress underneath is lumpy, riddled with pests. Fleas leap and bite. Lice nestle in the seams of the linen. The bed curtains, intended to keep warmth inside only, trap the smell of stale smoke, unwashed bodies, and the faint tang of chamber pots emptied too late. You stir awake not in silence, but in company, for a princess was rarely, if ever, alone. At the foot of your bed, a lady-in-waiting stirs from her pallet. Two maids sleep nearby, curled in their cloaks. Privacy, that luxury we take for granted today, simply did not exist. Every movement of your body, every sigh, every whispered prayer is witnessed, and you are cold, always cold. The castle walls never hold warmth. You press your feet to the rushes on the floor, only to feel dampness, for straw mats laid to cover the stone were rarely changed. Beneath them, mice scurry. This is your morning. Every morning the first minutes of the day already dismantled the myth. A princess in these centuries was not living in grandeur, but in conditions that would shock even a commoner today. For all her status, she suffered fleas, rats, and frostbite. She might eat from silver plates, yes, but in rooms thick with smoke from poorly vented hearths. Her lungs blackened by soot long before her time. Her world was not defined by indulgence, but by deprivation wrapped in protocol. And so, before she even speaks her first word of the day, we see that she is not a fairy tale heroine. She is a prisoner of her time. The princess kneels on the cold stone floor. Her first act is not to eat, nor to bathe, but to pray. At dawn, the chapel bell summons her to devotion. She mumbles psalms in Latin, a language she barely understands, but is expected to repeat with flawless obedience. The priests and chaplains remind her daily that her body is not her own. It belongs first to God, then to her father, and one day to her husband. Even in childhood, she is told this with unwavering certainty. Her hair, tangled and greasy from infrequent washing, is combed by attendants. Bathing is rare, for water is considered dangerous, a carrier of illness. Instead, herbs and perfumes mask the odors of sweat and smoke. The stench of medieval life lingers no matter how carefully hidden. Her breakfast, a small loaf, of course. Bread, maybe a piece of salted fish, watered ale in place of clean water. All eaten under the gaze of others, for she never dines alone. Food is survival, not pleasure. By the time she is 10 years old, the princess already understands her purpose. She has seen her mother pregnant, exhausted, perhaps even buried. She has heard whispers of betrothals, sisters promised at 12, cousins married at 14, alliances sealed before the girls even bled their first moon. She knows that her life is not hers to shape. Her father, the king, views her as a piece in a larger game, a pawn to be moved, traded, or sacrificed to secure territory, treaties, or peace. It is a gilded cage, yes. She wears fine gowns, though often reused and patched. She eats better than peasants, though less richly than we imagine. She sleeps beneath carved beams, though always with cold gnawing at her toes. Gilded, yet still a cage. And here is where the story truly begins. For what awaits her is not simply the discomfort of cold and fleas, but the relentless weight of control. Every hour of her day is scheduled, monitored, corrected. She will study languages she cannot choose, learn instruments she may not love, stitch tapestries she will never keep. She will smile when commanded, bow when required, speak only when permitted, and when the time comes, she will marry a stranger, not for love, not for companionship, but for politics. Her life is already written in the margins of treaties, the wax seals of ambassadors, the whispers of court advisers who never once ask what she wants. This is the reality of being a medieval princess. Not tiaras, not ballrooms, not enchanted gardens, but stone, cold, control, and survival. So, as we begin this journey, I invite you to walk beside her, feel the straw beneath your feet, taste the stale ale at breakfast, listen to the endless chanting of prayers, and remember, behind every fairy tale we cherish lies a harsher truth. A life lived not in freedom but in duty, because this is what medieval princess life was really like. From a distance, the medieval castle looks like the very definition of strength. Towering ramparts pierce the skyline, banners flap proudly, and guards patrol the battlements. For peasants toiling in the fields, it is a sign of authority and protection. To passing travelers, it is a landmark of power. But for the princess within its walls, the castle is both fortress and cage. Walk across the drawbridge and step into the courtyard. The illusion of grandeur fades quickly. The stench of livestock hangs in the air. Pigs root in the mud. Chickens cluck and scatter underfoot. Dogs fight over scraps near the kitchens. Manure mixes with mud, creating a thick sludge that clings to shoes and hems alike. This is not the clean marble palace of fairy tales. It is a working stronghold, noisy, dirty, and alive, with smells that never truly leave the stone. Castles were built to withstand armies, not to comfort inhabitants. Stone walls, up to 12 feet thick, kept invaders out, but they also kept warmth from ever settling inside. In winter, frost crept along the inside of the walls. In summer, damp air clung to the chambers like mildew. Imagine lying in bed in December. Your breath rises as white mist into the dark air. Your fingers are stiff, your feet numb, even beneath layers of wool blankets. The fire in the hearth, tended all night, does little more than flicker against the vast cold of stone. The princess shivers awake, scratching at flea bites beneath her linen shift. listening to mice rustling in the straw on the floor. It is important to understand. No amount of rank protected her from this cold. She could be the daughter of the king himself, and still she would wake with aching joints and blue lips. Close your eyes and listen. A castle is never silent. At dawn, the chapel bell tolls, summoning prayers. Servants scurry down corridors with buckets of water sloshing, their footsteps echoing. Horses snort in the stables. Blacksmiths hammer iron into shape. Dogs bark, guards shout. The castle breathes with noise. Even in her chamber, the princess never hears peace. Maids whisper as they sew. The fire spits and hisses. Wind moans through. Arrow slits disguised as windows. And beneath all of it, faint scratching. Rats, always present, gnawing behind the walls. Step into the great hall, the heart of the castle. Here the family dines, courts, visitors, and hosts festivities. At first, it impresses. Soaring timber-bird roof, colourful banners, tapestries showing saints and battles. Candles flicker, torches burn. A long table stretches the length of the room. But stay a while, and reality seeps in. The rushes on the floor, straw mixed with herbs, have not been changed for months. They squelch with spilled ale, grease, and worse. Dogs dart between benches, waiting for scraps. Smoke from the central hearth drifts upward, but rarely escapes cleanly through the vents. It gathers under the beams, making eyes water and lungs ache. Nobles eat with their fingers. They wipe greasy hands on tablecloths or on the fur of dogs. At their feet, servants weave among them with trenchers of bread and joints of meat, slopping broth as they go. For the princess, the great hall is not a place of joy but of constant scrutiny. Every bite she takes, every sip of watered wine, every glance across the table is watched. A single misstep, chewing too loudly, speaking too softly, spilling her cup becomes a whisper. Tomorrow, splendor, yes, but splendor layered over stench. No castle was complete without a chapel. For the princess, it was not just an architectural feature but a second home. Here, she knelt on cold stone floors for prayers at dawn, noon, and dusk. She repeated Latin psalms she barely understood, guided by priests who reminded her endlessly of duty. To God, to father, to husband. The chapel was both sanctuary and shackle. Candles flickered, incense curled, shadows loomed. The echoes of chanting made her voice sound small, as though swallowed by the stone. Her knees ached from hours of kneeling, her mind dulled by endless repetition. Yet this was her duty. We speak of private chambers, but privacy is a concept foreign to medieval. Royalty, the princess's chamber, is shared. Ladies in waiting sleep nearby. Maids come and go at all hours. Guards stand outside. Even her bed, draped with curtains, cannot shield her from constant eyes and ears. At night, she hears the soft breathing of others in the room. In the morning, her body is dressed by attendants. When she eats, others watch. When she writes letters, scribes sometimes copy them. Secrets are rare, silence rarer. Even tears must be controlled. A princess cannot sob in solitude. She can only dab discreetly at her eyes under the pretense of prayer. The kitchen is the beating, smoky heart of the castle. Fires roar day and night. Spits turn with entire oxen. Cauldrons boil with stews. Knives hack through bone. The smell carries through corridors, a mix of roasting meat, blood, and sweat. Servants shout over the din. Scullions scrub pots blackened with soot. Grease spatters and clings to walls, to clothing, even to hair. The princess does not work here, but she is never free from its reach. The food she eats is rich, yes, but also heavy, greasy, and spiced to mask the taste of meat stored too long. After every feast, she feels the queasy weight of too much fat. Little freshness, step outside into the courtyard. It is not a manicured paradise, but a working space. Blacksmith's hammer, stable boys shovel dung, soldiers drill with pikes. The air is fresher, yes, but also filled with shouts, neighs, and hammer blows. Gardens exist, but they are practical. Herbs for medicine, vegetables for kitchens, flowers for prayers. Rain turns the earth to mud, clinging to her hem. In spring, it smells of blossoms. In autumn, of rot dot. For the princess, gardens are a rare reprieve. Here, she may walk with her. Ladies, collect herbs for the still room, or whisper secrets more safely than in stone halls. But even here, she is observed. Her steps watched by guards. No act of description can be complete without mentioning the smallest, most relentless inhabitants. Vermin, fleas infest rushes on the floor. Lice crawl through hair and linens. Mice dart beneath benches. Rats chew grain sacks and bold-facedly skitter across dining tables at night. Even in royal chambers, fleas bite ankles until the skin welts red. It is not a question of whether the princess encounters vermin. It is how many, how often, and how badly she suffers their irritation. We know this not from imagination alone, but from records. In the accounts of noble households, orders to replace Russia's fowl with dog's urine appear frequently. Chronicles complain of lice in every bed. Even monarchs themselves lamented discomfort. Edward I of England ordered chimneys improved after choking on smoke. Isabella of France was said to keep her hair shorn to battle lice infestations. If queens and kings endured this, imagine their daughters. And yet, for all its discomfort, the castle is power. To peasants outside, it is unreachable majesty. To foreign envoys, it is a statement of strength. To the princess, it is a paradox. These walls are her cradle, her school, her refuge in siege. They are also her bars, keeping her enclosed until her father decides she is ready to be sent away in marriage. Every stone reminds her of her father's authority. Every corridor whispers of her lack of freedom. So, what was the castle environment? For a medieval princess, it was not a palace of luxury, but a fortress of survival. Cold, smoky, noisy, crawling with vermin, devoid of privacy, and yet majestic to those who could only view it from afar. The princess's world was carved from stone and shadow. It shaped her body with cold, her lungs with smoke, her patience with constant surveillance. It hardened her spirit and taught her that life, even for the most privileged women of her age, was not about freedom but endurance. The fairy tale palace crumbles here. In its place stands a fortress, harsh, unyielding, unforgettable. For the medieval princess, learning was not a journey of discovery. It was not meant to spark her curiosity, nor to expand her sense of self. Education, in her world, had a single purpose: to increase her value as a political asset. Every book she read, every hymn she memorized, every stitch she learned to make, all were tools to prepare her for marriage. She was not a student in the modern sense. She was an investment, and like any investment, her training was controlled, scrutinized, and designed to serve the interests of others, her father, her future husband, and the realm that claimed her body as part of its political machinery. So let us walk through her education from dawn to dusk, from childhood to womanhood, and see how her mind and spirit were shaped. Sometimes broken by this unrelenting program, her day begins with prayer. Before lessons in music or language, before food even, she kneels in the chapel. The words of Latin psalms fall from her lips. They are memorized, not understood. Comprehension is not the goal. Obedience is. After prayer comes instruction. A governess or a chaplain begins her lessons. The subjects vary by age and kingdom, but they follow a familiar pattern. Languages: Latin for the church, French for diplomacy, sometimes English, Spanish, or Italian depending on alliances. She must recite conjugations, translate passages, repeat words until her tongue stumbles less. Music, the harp, the lute, the psaltery. Instruments are not for her enjoyment, but for displaying refinement before suitors. Needlework, hours bent. Over embroidery, weaving gold thread into religious tapestries or family emblems. Needle pricks swell her fingers, but perfection is demanded. Household management, from the still room to the storeroom. She must know how to order servants, balance provisions, and preserve herbs. She may not do the labor herself, but she must understand it well enough to oversee it. Court etiquette, how to bow, how to sit, how to smile without seeming too bold. Every gesture is a lesson in control. Religion, not merely prayer, but doctrine. She is reminded constantly that disobedience offends not only her father, but God himself. This is her curriculum. It is relentless, unforgiving, and entirely external. Nowhere is there a space for personal preference, no subject chosen because it delights her. Her likes and dislikes are irrelevant. She is molded into the woman others need her to be. Language is perhaps the most crucial skill. A princess is rarely expected to remain in her homeland. More often, she will be married abroad, and her ability to negotiate court life in another tongue may determine her survival. So, from childhood, she is drilled. French phrases, Latin prayers, proverbs in Italian. Her tutors rap her knuckles when she falters. They repeat words until her head swims. Historical accounts confirm this rigor. Catherine of Aragon, for instance, was educated in Latin, Greek, and French, preparing her for life in foreign courts. Princesses were expected to speak not merely fluently, but elegantly. Their words a reflection of their families. For the princess in our story, language lessons are both a window and a wall. They open the world to her, allowing glimpses of faraway places she will one day inhabit. But they also remind her that her voice is not her own. It is a tool, sharpened for the benefit of others. Next comes needlework. Hours upon hours bent. Over embroidery frames, her back aching, her fingers pricked raw. Needlework is not optional. It is a defining skill of noble women. Tapestries, altar cloths, gowns. These are more than decoration. They are displays of piety, wealth, and discipline. A princess's embroidery may be gifted to abbeys, displayed at weddings, or sent abroad as diplomatic gifts. Every stitch is a public act, and the discipline required is crushing. She may be no older than 8, but mistakes earn scolding. Crooked lines are unpicked and redone. She learns patience the hard way, through repetition and pain. Needlework, like prayer, teaches obedience. But in the quiet hum of thread against linen, the princess may sometimes find a strange solace. It is one of the few tasks she controls with her own hands. Within the confines of her duty, a faint sense of creation survives. Then there is music, the harp, the lute, sometimes the clavichord. Lessons echo through stone corridors as she plucks strings or presses keys. Music is meant to soften her image. A noble woman who plays well is admired as cultured, graceful, and disciplined. But behind the performance lies grueling practice. Fingers blister, strings snap, notes falter, and tutors grow impatient. Music is not freedom, but performance. She learns songs not of her choosing, but of tradition. Hymns, courtly ballads, dances to entertain ambassadors. Her voice, like her body, is trained for display. Religion frames every lesson. The princess is reminded that she is born into sin, that disobedience will damn her, that humility is her greatest virtue. Priests emphasize that her duty is obedience to God, to her father, to her husband. They warn her of Eve's temptation, of women who led men astray, of hellfire waiting for the disobedient. Her education is not merely intellectual, but moral. Indoctrination. Fear is as constant a teacher as any governess. We may imagine princesses spared from punishment, but records suggest otherwise. While they may not be beaten as peasant children were, they faced harsh correction, public shaming before peers, extra prayers on bruised knees, hours of silent embroidery as penance, meals withheld until lessons were mastered. The goal was not cruelty for its own sake, but discipline. A princess must be perfect. She must never forget her role. Every punishment reinforced that lesson. She was not her own. Interestingly, many princesses were educated by women, governesses, ladies of the court, widowed noblewomen with experience. These women enforced discipline with unflinching severity, but they also sometimes became allies. A governess might protect her charge from harsher punishments, slip her an extra piece of bread, or whisper advice about survival. Lady Isabel, in Our Princess's Life, fills this role. She is both taskmaster and confidant, teaching harshly, but also quietly reminding the girl that strength lies in endurance. In a world where men dominate decisions, women often became each other's only refuge. Another crucial subject is household management. Though the princess will one day preside over estates, she will not run them directly. Instead, she must know enough to command servants and manage resources, so she is taught how to track provisions in the storeroom, how to brew remedies in the still room, how to organize feasts for hundreds, how to discipline servants with fairness, but authority. This is perhaps the most practical part of her training, and yet, even here, freedom is absent. She learns not because she will control her own household, but because she must be ready to serve her husbands. What does such an education do to a child? By the age of 10, she is fluent in languages she did not choose to study, proficient in music she may not love, skilled in embroidery that leaves her fingers scarred, and steeped in religious doctrine that tells her she is small, sinful, and secondary. Her playtime is minimal, her friendships are cautious, her laughter is measured, the emotional toll is heavy. She feels pride when praised, but it is pride laced with fear of failing. She feels satisfaction in learning, but it is always shadowed by the knowledge that the learning is not for her own sake. In truth, her childhood is not her own. It is already mortgaged to the state. Consider Eleanor of Castile, who became Queen of England in the 13th century. As a girl, she was trained in Castilian customs, French language, and the management of estates. Her education was described as without rest or frivolity. Or Isabella of Valois, married to Richard II of England at age 7. Her tutors recorded her long hours of embroidery, French recitation, and prayers. She played little, for every hour was measured. These were not exceptions. They were the rule. So we see the truth. Education was not a key that opened doors for the princess. It was a cage, shaping her into the image required of her. Every lesson closed off alternatives, narrowing her identity until only one remained, that of dutiful daughter, obedient bride, fertile mother. And yet, within this cage, small sparks of individuality sometimes survived. A favorite hymn, a hidden sketch, a whispered joke with a governess. Tiny rebellions that kept her human. So, what was the education of a medieval princess? It was not the broad exploration of mind we value today. It was narrow, sharp, utilitarian. It polished her manners, refined her voice, hardened her patience, and subdued her spirit. It was preparation not for a career or independence, but for a transaction, marriage. She was a pupil, yes, but more than that, she was a product. And as the lessons ended each day, she was reminded that they were not ends in themselves. They were steps on a path already chosen for her, a path that would soon lead her away from childhood altogether. From the moment a princess is born, the whispers begin. Who will she marry? What alliance can she secure? Which kingdom might she bind to her father's throne with her body, her name, her womb? Her cradle is barely rocked before envoys speculate. Her future, her first teeth are not yet in, and already marriage negotiations are whispered in corridors. By the time she is 7 or 8, suitors are proposed, contracts drafted. Childhood is not a season of innocence. It is a waiting room for betrothal. For the princess, this shadow hangs heavy. While she recites Latin prayers and bends over embroidery, she knows, one day, she will be sent away, her fate sealed by men at a table, their ink and wax more powerful than her tears or wishes. Marriage in the medieval age was not about love. It was a transaction, pure and simple. Lands, titles, armies, and dowries moved with the bride. The princess was the parchment on which treaties were signed, the seal that authenticated alliances. Consider Eleanor of Aquitaine, married first to the King of France, then to the King of England, carrying half of modern France in her dowry. Or Isabella of France, wed to Edward II, her body the bridge between two warring nations. These marriages were not unions of hearts, but contracts of steel and politics. The princess is told this from her youth. She must accept it, but understanding does not lessen the weight. To know that one's worth is measured not by character, but by utility, this is the heaviest lesson of all. When the time comes, a betrothal is announced. Perhaps she is 12, perhaps younger. She stands beside her father as envoys, present rings, letters, gifts. She is dressed in fine gowns, her hair braided with ribbons. She smiles on command, but her heart beats in fear, for she has never met the man to whom she is promised. He is often older, sometimes by decades. He may be kind, cruel, or indifferent. She does not know, and she cannot refuse. The betrothal is celebrated with feasts, prayers, blessings. Everyone smiles except the princess. She smiles because she must, not because she can. Sometimes the marriage occurs before she even meets her husband. A proxy wedding is arranged. A stand-in groom, often an ambassador, places a ring on her finger. In the eyes of the church, she is now married. In the eyes of her family, her duty is sealed. The true husband waits in another country. She will meet him only after traveling there, already bound, already a wife in name. Imagine the fear of such a moment. To vow, obedience and loyalty to a man you have never seen, to surrender your life to a name on parchment, to become a wife without ever feeling like one. Behind every marriage is a dowry. The princess does not control it, but she is its embodiment. Gold, land, jewels, or castles, her family sends them with her, a payment to secure her position. If she is mistreated, her dowry is rarely returned. She becomes not only a pawn, but also collateral. Her body is the coin. Her future is the bargain. On her wedding day, the princess is adorned in silks, jewels, and veils. To outsiders, she gleams like a fairy tale bride, but under the finery lies dread. Her gown weighs heavily, stiff with embroidery. Her crown presses against her temples. The church smells of incense and candle smoke. Priests chant, nobles watch, bells toll. The world sees spectacle. She feels suffocation. When the vows are spoken, her voice trembles, not from shyness, but from fear. For she knows this is not the beginning of freedom, but the end of it. After the wedding, or after the betrothal, comes departure. She leaves her homeland, often forever. The journey is long, grueling. By cart and by ship, she travels across mountains, rivers, seas. Her retinue carries trunks of gowns, tapestries, prayer books. She brings a small household of attendants, but no true comfort. The road is mud in rain, dust in summer. Inns are cold and crowded. Storms toss ships until she retches into buckets, praying for land. And all the while, the knowledge grows. She is leaving her family. She will likely never see her parents again. Letters will be rare, travel rarer still. She is not only changing households, but losing a world. At last, she arrives. The court of her new husband greets her with ceremony, but not warmth. Every eye is on her. They examine her dress, her speech, her bearing. They judge her fertility, her health, her manners. She feels like an animal paraded in a market. One misstep, a stumble on the stairs, a mistake in language will be whispered about for weeks. She must be perfect, even in exhaustion. Her husband, when she meets him, may be a stranger in every sense. Older, sterner, colder. Perhaps he greets her with courtesy, perhaps with indifference. Whatever his nature, she has no choice but to accept it. The wedding feast is over. The hall echoes with laughter, songs, and the scraping of trenchers. But eventually, the time comes for the ritual every princess dreads, the bedding ceremony. Guests may escort the couple to their chamber, cheering crudely. Curtains are drawn, candles snuffed. She sits on the bed, her gown heavy, her body trembling. Here, the reality of marriage reveals itself in its harshest form. The princess is expected to endure, to produce heirs, to prove her value. Consent is irrelevant. Her body belongs not to her, but to her husband and to the dynastic future he represents. It is not romance. It is duty in its starkest, most intimate expression. Consider Isabella of Valois, married to Richard II of England at age 7. She was sent from France to England, a child bride in a foreign land. Though the marriage was not consummated, she lived in a strange court, isolated, and watched Margaret of Scotland wed to King Eric of Norway at 13. She left her homeland, crossing stormy seas, to live among strangers. Her youth swallowed by politics. These stories were not rare. They were the norm. What does such a system do to a young woman's spirit? It breeds fear, isolation, and resignation. The princess knows she has no voice. Her life is arranged, not lived. Her body is currency, her womb a vessel for alliances. Some rebel quietly, refusing small duties, sulking in chambers, writing secret letters. Others break under the weight, withdrawing into silence or piety. A few rare women, like Eleanor of Aquitaine or Margaret of Anjou, seize what agency they can, using marriage itself as a tool of influence. But such strength is rare and often punished. For most, marriage is not liberation but a chain. Legally and spiritually, marriage is a transfer. Before the vows, the princess belongs to her father. Afterward, she belongs to her husband. Her identity is subsumed. Her name may even change. Her household certainly does. It is a passage not into adulthood, but into ownership. So what was marriage for a medieval princess? It was not romance, not partnership, not choice. It was transaction. She was pawn, prize, and pledge. Her wedding gown was as much a shroud for her freedom as it was a garment of celebration. This is the true weight of marriage, the knowledge that your body, your voice, your very self are no longer your own. They are instruments of politics, wielded by men who will never feel the cold stone of your chamber or the terror of your wedding night. And yet, within this system, some princesses endured. Some even carved out slivers of power, wielding influence from within the very cage built for them. But those stories belong to later chapters. For now, the princess sits in her new home, her crown heavy, her heart heavier still. Every princess knows the day will come, the day she must leave her homeland. For years, whispers of her marriage have grown louder, her dowry negotiated, her trousseau stitched and packed. But knowing does not ease the blow when the hour finally arrives. On that morning, the castle is alive with noise. Servants load trunks into wagons. Horses snort in their stalls. Attendants hurry with last-minute bundles of linens, furs, and prayer books. The princess stands in her chamber for the final time, the rushes crackling under her slippers, the walls damp and familiar. This was her prison, yes, but also her home. And now it is gone. Her father may embrace her, though often with more formality than warmth. Her mother, if alive, may whisper advice, obey, endure. Bear sons, younger siblings cry, perhaps, but she herself must not. Tears at departure are seen as weakness, dishonor. She must walk forward with dignity, though inside she feels her childhood tearing away like a cloak dropped behind her. She knows, even at 12 or 13, that she may never return. Letters travel slowly, visits rarer still. She is leaving not just her family, but her language, her customs, the graves of her ancestors. She steps onto the road, and her old life ends. Her journey is not solitary. She travels with an entire household, attendants, guards, cooks, chaplains, governesses. The road is alive with creaking carts, neighing horses, clanking armor. Flags flutter in the wind, bearing her family's coat of arms, a reminder that she is not simply a girl on the road, but a living treaty in motion. The procession is long. Wagons carry her dowry, bolts of cloth, casks of wine, chests of jewels. Her trousseau includes gowns embroidered with her family's crest, bed hangings, tapestries, even kitchen vessels. Every item declares her worth, a visible guarantee of the alliance her marriage cements. Yet within this spectacle, the princess sits quietly, often enclosed in a curtained litter. Her face is rarely seen, her silence constant. Around her, men make decisions about routes, stops, supplies. She's the purpose of the journey. but never its master. The romantic imagination might picture processions moving smoothly across green countryside. The reality is harsher. Medieval roads are rough at best, impassable at worst. Rain turns dirt to mud that swallows wheels to their axles. In summer, dust chokes lungs and blinds eyes. Bridges are few. Rivers must often be forded with wagons. Half submerged, horses trembling under the weight. Bandits haunt the roads. Though guards ride ahead, every bend in the path is a risk. The princess may not see the skirmishes, but she hears them whispered, an ambush driven off, a scout wounded, valuables hidden quickly under cloaks, and there is discomfort at every mile. Her litter jolts over stones, making her stomach churn. Fleas bite within its cushions. The air grows staler with every hour. At inns, the straw on the floors is filthy, the air thick with smoke and sweat. For her, the journey is not only long, but humiliating. Her royal status cannot shield her from the grime of travel. For many princesses, the most dreaded part is the sea voyage. To marry across borders often means crossing waters, the Channel, the North Sea, the Mediterranean. Picture it. A wooden ship creaking at anchor, sails stiff in the wind. The princess, cloaked in furs, walks the gangplank, her ladies clutching. Rosaries, priests bless the vessel with holy water, but blessings do not still the waves. Once at sea, the world lurches, the ship pitches and groans. Waves slam against its sides, salt spray soaking clothes, hair, lips. The princess grows pale, her stomach rebelling. Seasickness strikes quickly and cruelly. She clutches her bedding, moaning, while servants struggle to comfort her. Food spoils. Water barrels grow foul. Chamber pots spill with every roll of the deck. Storms turn fear into terror. Wind howls, ropes snap, men shout over thunder. The vessel shudders, threatening to break. The princess, raised in stone castles, now feels utterly powerless, tossed on waters that care nothing for crowns. Historical accounts confirm the ordeal. When Margaret Tudor sailed to Scotland in 1503, storms nearly sank her fleet. Catherine of Aragon endured months at sea before reaching England, seasick and terrified. For every princess, the ocean was not passage, but ordeal. At last, land appears. Bells ring, horns sound, crowds gather. The princess steps ashore, pale, unsteady, her body aching from days or weeks of travel. Trumpets announce her arrival, banners wave, and yet she feels utterly foreign. The people speak a language that strains her ears. Their fashions differ. Their prayers sound strange, even if familiar in form. The air smells of unfamiliar herbs. The bread tastes of unfamiliar grain. She is greeted with ceremony gifts, speeches, parades, but beneath it all lies judgment. Every eye studies her. Is she beautiful? Is she healthy enough to bear sons? Does she speak their tongue with grace? Is she pious, humble, obedient? She is scrutinized as though she were a rare horse or jewel. Her worth assessed not by her heart but by her utility. From the moment she enters her husband's court, the princess is tested. At banquets, she must eat without error, using the correct gestures, smiling at the correct moments. At prayers, she must kneel with humility, recite psalms without faltering. At entertainments, she must laugh gracefully. Though exhaustion weighs her down with her new husband, she must be both submissive and appealing, attentive yet not overbold. Servants whisper about her, courtiers compare her to rivals. Ambassadors report every detail back to her father's court. Her life is lived on stage, every action a performance. Yet beneath the spectacle lies crushing loneliness. The princess has left behind everything familiar: her mother's face, her siblings' voices, the chapel where she prayed, even the vermilion chamber that still smelled like home. Her new household speaks differently. Her letters are censored. Her attendants, though loyal, are foreign to the land and eyed with suspicion. Friendships are difficult, for every potential ally may also be a spy. The silence of her chambers at night is heavy, filled with the ache of displacement. She kneels to pray, but even her prayers feel different here, echoing strangely in the stone of a foreign chapel. The journey abroad is more than physical. It is symbolic. It is the severing of her past and the beginning of her role as political pawn, wife, and soon mother. It is a rite of passage, not chosen but endured. It is the final proof that her life is not her own. And yet, within this ordeal, she also glimpses strength. To survive the mud, the seas, the scrutiny, she must cultivate resilience. She learns to endure sickness, fear, and loneliness. She learns to smile through exhaustion, to bow through humiliation. In surviving the journey, she begins to survive her new life. Examples from history: Isabella of France, 1295 to 1358, at age 12. She was sent to England to marry Edward II. Chroniclers describe her voyage as rough and perilous. On arrival, she faced immediate scrutiny from Edward's court. Her youth and foreign manners mocked. Margaret of Scotland, 1283 to 1290, known as the Maid of Norway. She died at just 7 years old on the journey to claim the Scottish throne, illustrating the deadly risks of travel. Catherine of Aragon, 1485 to 1536. Her journey to England lasted months. Storms battered her fleet, supplies ran low, and seasickness plagued her. She arrived exhausted, only to be judged instantly as the bride of Prince Arthur. These examples remind us that the journey abroad was not a simple change of residence. It was a test of survival. By the end of the journey, the princess is transformed. Childhood is gone. Home is gone. Her father's authority is gone, replaced by her husband's. She has crossed not just borders, but thresholds, from girl to woman, from subject to stranger, from daughter to bride. The psychological weight is immense, and yet, paradoxically, it is also in this crucible of hardship that some princesses first discover their strength. For the first time, they stand without their father's shadow. Alone, they must adapt or perish. So, what was the journey abroad for a medieval princess? It was not adventure, not romance, not exploration. It was rupture. It was seasickness, mud, loneliness, and fear. It was leaving behind every face she knew and entering a world where every face judged her. It was the final act of her childhood and the first act of her adulthood, a transformation carved by hardship. The fairy tale says the princess travels to meet her prince. The truth is harsher. She travels to lose herself, to become what politics demand, and yet, in surviving, she begins to carve the first faint outlines of resilience. She learns to endure the storm, the road, the eyes of strangers. She learns that survival itself is power. This is the journey abroad, not a fairy tale road to happiness, but a crucible of endurance that tests whether she can carry the weight of her role. The journey has ended, the marriage sealed, the feasts consumed, and yet, for the princess, her true trial has only begun. She is now installed in her husband's castle, her new court, a place at once dazzling and suffocating. Everything is unfamiliar. The dialect spoken, the prayers chanted, the smells of the kitchen, the songs of the minstrels. Even the walls feel different, carved by another culture's hands, echoing with unfamiliar footsteps. She must learn quickly. A single mistake here can follow her for life. The way she bows, the words she uses at meals, the gown she chooses for. A feast, each detail is noted, compared, whispered about. Courtiers test her like hawks circling prey, searching for weakness. Her marriage, her household, her reputation all begin here, in this web of intrigue. Her husband is both anchor and storm. In theory, he is her protector. In practice, he may be indifferent, distant, or harsh. At times, he is simply a stranger. She may see him only at feasts, in chapel, and at night in the chamber. Their conversations are brief, often strained. He may be much older, his interests foreign to her, youth, or he may be scholarly, distracted, more concerned with politics than with his bride. For the princess, this strangeness breeds anxiety. Is he kind? Is he cruel? Will he listen? Or will he treat her as merely a vessel for heirs? She learns to read his moods like the weather, shaping herself to his temper. In some marriages, affection grows. In others, resentment festers. But in nearly all, love is secondary to politics. She is his wife, not by choice, but by contract. And with him comes not security, but scrutiny. The court of her husband is a stage of constant performance. Feasts, nights of music, roasted meats, overflowing wine. She must smile, converse, flatter, and never show weariness. Chapel, hours of prayer, kneeling side by side with her husband, priests watching, courtiers noting her piety, ceremonies, dances, coronations, celebrations of victories. Her gown must gleam, her jewels must dazzle, her every move must reflect honor to her husband. Audience with envoys, she stands beside her husband as ambassadors, present gifts. Her posture, her silence, her occasional words in practiced French or Latin are judged as reflections of her value. The princess is no longer a child, but she is not free. She is watched, measured, weighed every day. Within her chamber, she is surrounded by ladies in waiting, many chosen not by her but by her husband's family. These women serve her, dress her, entertain her, and also report on her. Their loyalty is divided, their words sharp, their eyes always alert. Friendship is possible, but dangerous. A whispered joke may be repeated to the Queen Mother. A confession of loneliness may become fodder for gossip, yet she cannot live without them. They braid her hair, lace her gowns, share her meals. They are her constant companions, her confidants, her jailers. In time, she learns to sort them. Some become trusted allies, others tolerated spies. Lady Isabel, the governess who travelled with her from home, may remain her closest support. But even she must tread carefully, for foreign courts rarely trust outsiders. Often, the greatest challenge comes not from her husband, but from his mother. The Queen Mother is an experienced matriarch, versed in politics, suspicious of the new bride. She watches the princess with critical eyes, testing her every move. Is the princess too proud, too meek, too extravagant, too plain? The Queen Mother whispers her judgments to the king, to the nobles, shaping opinion. Sometimes she offers guidance. More often she asserts dominance, reminding the princess that this is not her court, but hers. Life at court is never simple. It is a game of factions, of whispers in corridors, of alliances struck at feasts and betrayed the next morning. The princess is at the center of it, yet powerless. Her every action ripples through politics. If she favors one lady over another, it sparks jealousy. If she greets one envoy warmly, it raises suspicion. If she sits too close to one nobleman, rumors fly of scandal. Every smile is strategy. Every silence, to dot and beyond the palace, wars rage, treaties crumble, taxes rise. Her marriage is supposed to secure peace, but peace is fragile. She becomes a symbol praised if the realm prospers, blamed if it falters. Piety is her shield, and her burden. She must attend mass daily, kneel at every procession, donate to monasteries, and sponsor chapels. If she falters, whispers of sin arise. If she excels, she is praised as a model wife and queen. Religion offers her little comfort. It is less about faith than about display. Yet, within the quiet of the chapel, she sometimes finds moments of peace, alone before the altar, candles flickering. She whispers prayers, not for alliances or heirs, but for herself. At the heart of her married life lies the expectation of children. More specifically, sons. Every month without pregnancy is noted, every miscarriage whispered, every daughter born considered disappointment. Her worth is judged not by her wit, her kindness, her piety, but by her womb. Childbirth looms like a spectre. She has seen women die in labor, heard screams from chambers turned into tombs. She knows that each attempt at motherhood is a gamble with death, yet she cannot refuse. Producing heirs is her duty, the very reason for her existence in this marriage. She learns to steel herself, to pray, to endure. The court is alive with intrigue. Nobles test her with flattering words, probing for secrets. Foreign envoys seek her sympathy, hoping to influence her husband. Even servants carry tales from her chambers. A misplaced word can become a rumor of treason. A glance at the wrong man can spark accusations of adultery. For a princess, scandal is never far away. She learns to guard her tongue, to weigh her gestures, to smile without revealing thought. It is exhausting but necessary, and yet within this suffocating web, she sometimes finds space for herself. In the still room, she learns to mix herbs, remedies, and perfumes, skills both practical and private. With her husband, if he is scholarly, she may share books, ideas, even genuine companionship among her ladies. She may find one or two who become true confidants, women who understand her burdens. These moments are small, but they are hers. In them, she discovers slivers of agency, not freedom, but fragments of it. Examples from History. Helena of Aquitaine, 1122 to 1204, as Queen of both France and England. She wielded real political power, but only by navigating endless intrigue. Her marriages were battlegrounds of diplomacy and domestic conflict. Margaret of Anjou, 1430 to 1482, married to Henry VI of England. She became a political force during the Wars of the Roses, leading armies. Yet she was vilified as foreign, ambitious, dangerous. Isabella of France, 1295 to 1358, married to Edward II of England. She endured neglect and hostility, eventually rebelling against her husband and seizing power. Each of these women demonstrates the knife's edge on which princesses lived, potential for influence, always shadowed by danger. What does this life do to the princess's spirit? It teaches her to mistrust, to guard, to perform. Genuine laughter becomes rare, genuine friendships rarer. She learns to play a role so constant that she forgets where performance ends and self begins. Loneliness lingers, even in crowded halls. Fear gnaws, even in times of peace. The weight of expectation never lifts, and yet she endures, because endurance is survival. So, what was married life for a medieval princess? It was not a life of romance, nor of leisure. It was a stage of constant performance, a cage of courtly intrigue, a battlefield where words cut deeper than swords. Her husband may be stranger or ally, her ladies may be friends or spies. Her womb may bless or betray her. She lived in splendor, yes, but splendor shadowed by fear, and within it all she searched for small acts of selfhood, a whispered prayer, a hidden letter, a secret alliance. Tiny rebellions that reminded her she was not only pawn, but person. This is married life for a medieval princess, a role scripted by politics, performed under scrutiny, endured with resilience. Marriage for a medieval princess is never complete without children, more specifically without sons. From the moment she crosses her husband's threshold, whispers begin. When will she conceive? When will she provide an heir? Her meals are watched, her belly observed, her complexion scrutinized for signs of pregnancy. Every month without childbearing draws mutters of failure. Her worth as a wife, a queen, even as a woman, rests on her womb. She may be witty, pious, graceful. None of it matters if she cannot bear a son. This expectation presses on her shoulders like a crown of iron. Often she conceives young. Many princesses are wed at 12 or 13, and pregnancies follow. Swiftly, her body, still unready, endures the strain. Nausea plagues her mornings, faintness strikes in chapel. Her dresses are let out as her belly swells. Attendants hover, offering broths and herbs, yet fear lingers. Miscarriages are common, stillbirths frequent, and every loss is not just grief, but disgrace. If she miscarries, rumors blame her, too sinful, too weak, too careless. Rarely is the truth spoken, that the knowledge of medicine is poor, that conditions are harsh, that death shadows all childbirth in this age. When the time comes, the princess enters confinement. Her chamber is darkened, tapestries hung over windows, candles lit, air grows heavy with incense and herbs meant to drive away evil spirits. Priests bless the room. Midwives prepare cloths, basins, knives. The princess lies in bed, sweat beading. Her forehead, labor begins with pain that claws through her body. Hours stretch into days. She moans, screams, prays. Attendants wipe her brow, whisper encouragement. A midwife kneels between her legs, hands ready. An Italian physician stands nearby, summoned at great expense, clutching instruments of iron that glint ominously in candlelight. The room fills with heat, with the metallic tang of blood, with the low hum of prayers. Every contraction feels like death drawing nearer. Childbirth in the medieval world is not a passage into motherhood. It is a gamble with death. 1 in 3 women die giving birth. Fevers follow even successful deliveries, carrying mothers away within days. The princess knows this. She has seen her mother, her aunts, her cousins buried young. She knows her own. Survival is uncertain, yet she has no choice but to endure. For hours, perhaps days, she hovers between life and death. She hears priests chanting last rites in the next room. She clutches rosaries until beads dig into her palms. She screams until her voice cracks, and all the while, courtiers wait outside. They do not pray for her survival. They pray for a son. Last, the cry of a newborn pierces the air. The midwife lifts the child high, red and wrinkled, squalling with life. If it is a boy, relief floods the room. Smiles break, prayers of thanks rise. The princess is praised as savior of the dynasty. Trumpets may sound, bells may ring. If it is a girl, silence falls. Faces remain composed, but disappointment hangs heavy. The princess, exhausted and bleeding, feels the weight of failure even in victory. And if the child is stillborn or dies within days, grief and guilt consume her. For the princess, the ordeal is not over. Her body is torn, fever threatens, infection lurks in every wound. Midwives press herbs to her skin, priests sprinkle holy water, servants whisper fears. She lies weak for weeks, sometimes months. Some never rise again, their beds becoming their coffins. If she survives, she is praised but not spared. Soon whispers begin again. When will she bear the next? Childbirth is not once, but many times. Year after year, the princess conceives, labors, births. Some children live, others die. Miscarriages, stillbirths, infant deaths, all common, all agonizing. Her body becomes battlefield, scarred and weary. Yet her duty remains. To stop bearing children is to risk replacement. To fail is to invite annulment or exile. She is caught in a cycle without escape. Pregnancy, birth, recovery, pressure, pregnancy again. Yet, within this ordeal, she sometimes finds allies, her midwives. Women skilled by experience, if not by science, comfort her with whispers and touch. Lady Isabel, her governess turned companion, sits by her side, holding her hand, wiping her brow. These women, bound by shared suffering, become her true family, and sometimes her husband surprises her. If he is scholarly, he may sit nearby, reading psalms aloud, or clasp her hand during labor. If he is kind, he may rejoice not only in sons, but in daughters too. Such tenderness is rare, but not impossible. These small acts of compassion give her strength. Every birth is more than personal, it is political. A son strengthens her position, secures succession, elevates her status. A daughter may be useful for alliances, but seldom grants her more power. A death in childbirth removes her from the chessboard entirely, often replaced by another bride. Her womb is battlefield, her children the treaties. She is both soldier and casualty. Examples from history: Jane Seymour, 1508 to 1537, Queen of England, died 12 days after giving birth to Edward VI. Her death was mourned, but her success in bearing a son overshadowed her tragedy. Isabella of Valois, 1389 to 1409, married to Richard II at age 7. She later remarried, enduring multiple pregnancies before dying at 20. Catherine of Aragon, 1485 to 1536, endured years of miscarriages and stillbirths. Only one child, Mary, survived. Her failure to produce a son led to annulment, exile, and the English Reformation. These women remind us that childbirth was not private joy but public trial. What does this do to the princess's spirit? It fills her with dread before every labor, with grief after every loss, with exhaustion after every survival. It teaches her that her body is never hers, that her value rises and falls with her children's breath, and yet it also awakens resilience. Each birth survived is a victory, each child raised a triumph. Her suffering carves strength into her soul. She becomes hardened, cautious, wise. She learns that to endure is to wield power. When at last she bears a healthy son, the court erupts. Bells toll, banners rise, gifts flow. She, frail and pale, is lifted into reverence. For the first time, she is not merely a wife, but a queen mother, mother of an heir. Her position strengthens. She is listened to more, respected more. Within the narrow confines of her role, she has gained influence. It is bittersweet. Her triumph comes not from her mind, her will, or her character, but from her body's survival. Yet she clings to it, for influence, however small, is a rare treasure. So what was childbirth for a medieval princess? It was not a private family matter, not a moment of tender joy. It was trial by fire. It was the battlefield of her body, the razor's edge of life and death. It was politics, wrapped in screams and blood. For every princess, childbirth was the test of her worth. To survive was a victory. To produce sons was triumph. To fail was ruin. And yet, within this brutal system, the princess endured. She screamed. She bled. She risked death. And in surviving, in the medieval world, she carved out space for herself. Was not one part of her influence. It was the frame for her legacy, around the entire picture. This is the paradox for of her survival. Religion was gained power and only by enduring the very system that crushed in times of grief and fear, but it also dictated her every choice, action and thought. From the moment she woke to the moment she lay down again, faith shaped her world. Bells rang from chapels to summon her to prayer. Priests lectured on duty, obedience, and sin. Saints were invoked, relics kissed, rosaries counted bead by bead. And yet, beneath this structure of faith ran a deeper current: fear, fear of sin, fear of hell, fear of stepping outside the narrow path prescribed for women. The princess's day was punctuated by prayer. At dawn, before food or lessons, she knelt on cold stone floors in the castle chapel, whispering psalms in Latin. At noon, another round of prayers. At dusk, compline. At night, final whispered prayers before sleep. Her rosary was both tool and tether. She fingered each bead, murmuring Hail Marys, Our Fathers, Glory Bees. The repetition lulled her, sometimes into peace, sometimes into despair. Feasts of saints filled her calendar. Lent demanded fasting. Advent required solemn anticipation. Every season, every month, every day carried rituals of devotion. Even meals were framed by faith. Blessings before eating, grace afterward. Even childbirth was shrouded in faith. Prayers for safe delivery. Holy water sprinkled on the newborn. Emergency baptisms if death seemed near. Faith was not an addition to life. It was life. But with devotion came fear. Priests warned constantly of sin, and for women especially, the warnings were sharp. Eve's temptation in Eden was preached again and again as proof of women's weakness. The princess was told, too much pride is sin, too much vanity in dress is sin, too much talk is sin, even stray thoughts could be sin. Her body was a battleground of temptation. Her desires were suspect. Even love for her children, if excessive, was considered dangerous, for it could rival love of God. Confession was both relief and terror. Kneeling before a priest, she confessed her thoughts, her mistakes, her doubts. The words left her lips, but shame clung. Absolution brought peace, but fear of backsliding never left. In moments of fear, she turned to saints. Each saint carried a specialty. Saint Margaret for childbirth, Saint Catherine for learning, Saint Anne for mothers. Her chamber might hold tiny relics, a fragment of bone, a strip of cloth said to belong to a saint. These were treasures carried across kingdoms, believed to hold divine power. She kissed them, prayed over them, clutched them in labor. Faith and superstition blurred here. Did she believe in God's power alone, or in the magic of relics? The line was never clear. Beyond official religion, superstition thrived. A sudden storm on her wedding day was a bad omen. Dropping a rosary meant misfortune. Dream of blood could predict death. The howling of dogs at night was a sign of plague. Her ladies-in-waiting whispered these beliefs constantly. They braided charms into her hair, tied protective ribbons to her gown, burned herbs to ward off evil spirits. She half believed, but in a world where science was weak and death was near, superstition gave a sense of control. Every princess had a confessor, a priest assigned to guide her soul. He was her spiritual advisor, but also her judge. She poured her heart to him. Fears, doubts, sins. In theory, he comforted her. In practice, he often reminded her of duty. If she complained of loneliness, he urged prayer. If she confessed resentment of her husband, he commanded obedience. If she dreamed of freedom, he warned her of hell. The confessor was meant to protect her soul. But sometimes he also reinforced her chains. Religion offered comfort, yes, but it also functioned as control. Her father invoked God's will to arrange her marriage. Her husband invoked God's authority to demand her obedience. Priests invoked God's judgment to silence her doubts. If she resisted, she was warned of damnation. If she submitted, she was praised as pious. Faith became the language of obedience. And yet, for all its chains, faith also gave her strength. In nights of fear, she whispered psalms until sleep came. In childbirth, she clutched relics and begged saints for mercy. In loneliness, she lit candles before the Virgin Mary, imagining a mother who understood her burdens. Faith gave her the courage to endure. It gave meaning to suffering, framing it as part of God's plan. It promised reward beyond this life, a heaven where her chains would finally break. Within religion, she found agency to sponsoring chapels, endowing convents, commissioning prayers. These acts were within her power. By aligning herself with the church, she carved a space of influence. Bishops respected her patronage. Monks prayed in her name. In time, she might even be remembered as a holy woman, her piety shaping her legacy. Some princesses became saints after death, not because they escaped the system, but because they endured it with faith. Elizabeth of Hungary, 1207 to 1231, renowned for charity and devotion. She became a saint after her death, remembered less as a pawn of politics than as a model of holiness. Blanche of Castile, 1188 to 1252, deeply pious. She combined faith with governance, ruling France as regent while fostering religious institutions. Margaret of Scotland, 1045 to 1093. Her devout practices and charitable works led to canonization, her piety outlasting the memory of her struggles. These women show how faith could be both a prison and a path to legacy, but always, beneath devotion and charity, fear remained. Fear of sin, fear of judgment, fear of the flames of hell, painted vividly in chapel frescoes. The princess lived in the shadow of damnation. A single mistake, a sinful thought, a careless word might condemn her soul forever. This fear shaped her obedience more powerfully than any king or law. So her world was layered. Faith gave her structure, devotion, hope. Fear kept her obedient, humble, silent. Superstition gave her a sense of control over chaos. Together, they created a spiritual cage, but also, strangely, a spiritual refuge. So, what was faith for a medieval princess? It was not simply belief, but atmosphere. It filled every moment of her day, every choice of her life. It was the voice that commanded her obedience, the hand that offered her comfort, the shadow that threatened her with hell. Her faith was both chain and shield. It bound her, but it also helped her endure. It silenced her, but it also gave her prayers. It controlled her, but it also gave her meaning. And in the end, faith was one of the few things she truly owned. Her jewels, her gowns, her very body belonged to others. But her whispered prayers, her secret thoughts, her belief in saints and miracles, those were hers alone. This is the paradox of faith for the medieval princess. It oppressed her, but it also sustained her. It was fear, but also hope. It was cage, but also key. Every medieval princess lived with one haunting question: how will I be remembered? Her life was not her own. Her marriage, her children, her duties were dictated by others. Yet once gone, her story would belong to others, to priests, chroniclers, poets, and the whispers of her people. Some would be remembered as saints, others as villains, many forgotten entirely. Her legacy was as fragile as her body in childbirth. The surest path to legacy was through children. If she bore a son who became king, her name endured, woven into dynastic histories. She would be praised as mother of the realm, her memory tied to her child's success. If her children died young, her memory often faded too. A princess without heirs was like a candle snuffed early, briefly bright, then forgotten. Yet even through daughter's legacy could spread. A daughter married to a foreign prince carried her mother's blood into new dynasties. Through such webs, a princess's name echoed across Europe. In death, her body became a site of memory. Tombs mattered. They declared her worth, her piety, her legacy. Some were buried in grand cathedrals, effigies carved in marble, hands clasped in eternal prayer. Pilgrims visited, candles burned, her name whispered in prayers. Others were interred quietly, their graves simple, their names fading with time. A grand tomb could preserve memory for centuries. A humble burial could erase it in a generation. One way a princess secured memory was through patronage. By funding convents, endowing chapels, sponsoring hospitals, she inscribed her name into stone and song. Every time monks sang psalms for her soul, every time a peasant prayed in a chapel she founded, her memory lived. Charity was not only piety, it was strategy. Some even commissioned books, chronicles, illuminated manuscripts, family genealogies. These works, copied by scribes, carried her name forward, but much of her legacy was out of her hands. Chroniclers, usually male clerics, recorded her life, and their words were biased. If she was pious, they praised her. If she was bold, they called her ambitious. If she defended her children, they labeled her dangerous. If she loved too fiercely, they accused her of sin. Her memory was written not by her, but about her. And often, the truth was reshaped to fit political needs. History shows the stark divide. Isabella of France, 1295 to 1358. Remembered by some as the she-wolf of France for rebelling against Edward II, though modern historians see her as courageous and capable. Eleanor of Aquitaine, 1122 to 1204. first criticized as scandalous, later celebrated as one of the most powerful women of her age, Elizabeth of Hungary, 1207–1231, canonized as a saint for her charity. Her struggles with politics largely erased in favor of her piety. The same actions, courage, ambition, leadership, could be framed as either virtue or sin, depending on who wrote the record. For every remembered queen, dozens of princesses disappeared into silence. Married young, dead in childbirth, their names recorded only in treaties. Their struggles, their endurance, their humanity vanished. This silence is its own tragedy. Women who endured as much as their more famous sisters are now lost, their stories untold, their lives reduced to dates and dowries. Even in silence, motherhood echoed. Every child born carried her memory, whether named after her, guided by her, or shaped by her prayers. The princess might never be praised in chronicles, but her influence lived on in the rulers she raised. In this way, her memory persisted, woven invisibly into dynasties. Sometimes her legacy survived in objects: a tapestry stitched by her hands, an illuminated book she owned, a piece of jewelry passed to her daughters. These relics carried whispers of her presence, tangible reminders of her life. For her descendants, such objects became heirlooms. For historians, centuries later, they became windows into forgotten lives. After her death, her memory was not static. It changed with time. A princess once praised could later be vilified if her children lost power. A woman once condemned could be sainted generations later. Her image was reshaped to suit the needs of politics, religion, or legend. For example, Isabella of Castile was remembered as a pious reformer, though her reign included brutal persecutions. Margaret of Anjou was demonized as foreign and ambitious during the Wars of the Roses. Yet modern historians recognize her as a capable leader in crisis. Memory was malleable. Her legacy a canvas painted and repainted by others. But beyond politics, beyond chronicles, beyond monuments, there is a quieter question. How did she wish to be remembered? Perhaps in the love of her children, who whispered prayers for her after her death. Perhaps in the convent she endowed, where nuns lit candles for her soul. Perhaps only in the memory of her ladies, who spoke her name with affection. Her true legacy may have been less about crowns and treaties, and more about the lives she touched in quiet ways. Today, when we remember these princesses, we see both warning and inspiration. Warning in the way their lives were controlled, their worth reduced, their freedoms denied. Inspiration in the way they endured, influenced, and carved agency despite oppression. Their memory challenges us to honor their endurance, to recognize their humanity, to ensure their silence does not continue. So, what was legacy for a medieval princess? It was uncertain, fragile, often unjust. It could raise her to sainthood, or cast her as villain. It could preserve her name for centuries, or erase it in a generation. But even when forgotten by chroniclers, her true legacy endured, in her children, in her patronage, in the whispers of those who loved her, and in remembering her now, we restore some of what was taken. We see her not only as pawn, but as person, not only as vessel, but as voice. This is her legacy: survival, endurance, influence, remembered not in fairy tales, but in truth. Childbirth changes everything. For years, the princess has lived under suspicion. Will she bear children? Will she give us a son? Her identity has been defined by expectation. But once she survives labor and produces a living heir, especially a boy, her role transforms. No longer merely a bride, she is now mother of the dynasty. Her position in the household, in the court, and in the realm strengthens overnight. The courtiers who once whispered doubts now bow deeper. The queen mother who tested her now treats her with reluctant respect. Her husband, if pleased, begins to consult her more. Her influence is still fragile, but it exists, and she seizes it. The princess is still bound by the system, but she is no longer a pawn. She is a piece with weight, capable of altering the game. As mother of heirs, her survival is vital. As guardian of children, she has a direct role in shaping the future king. As mistress of the household, she controls domestic rituals, servants, and ceremonies. She begins to participate in decisions about marriages of her children, alliances of her daughters, education of her sons. In small but meaningful ways, she shapes the dynasty's future. One of the most visible avenues of influence is charity. Medieval princesses often sponsor convents, hospitals, almshouses. They fund masses for the dead, distribute alms to the poor, or endow chapels with relics. On the surface, this is piety. In practice, it is power. Every act of charity builds her reputation, creates loyalty, and strengthens her legacy. A peasant receiving bread may whisper blessings of her name. A convent singing prayers in her honor ensures her memory echoes long after her death. These acts of patronage weave her influence into the fabric of society. Some princesses, especially those married to scholarly husbands, find space for intellectual influence. She may collect manuscripts, sponsor scribes, or establish libraries. She may encourage translations of works into the vernacular. She may even engage in learning herself, studying theology, history, or philosophy under trusted tutors. 4. The princess knowledge is both solace and strategy. Solace, because it gives her mind escape from constant duty. Strategy, because it equips her to advise her husband, shape her children's education, and converse with envoys. Every book copied, every manuscript preserved, becomes part of her. Hidden power within her household, the princess controls etiquette. She sets fashions by her dress, determines ceremonies by her presence, establishes hierarchies among her ladies. A smile from her can elevate a family's fortunes. A cold glance can ruin them. Courtiers know this, and they court her favor. Thus, even without direct political power, she becomes a force of influence. She is the invisible hand guiding alliances, rivalries, and ambitions within the court. Marriage may have begun as a contract, but over years, familiarity grows. The princess learns her husband's temper, his fears, his hopes. She learns when to speak and when to remain silent, when to persuade and when to yield. In private, her words matter. She may whisper counsel in bed, at meals, during prayer. Kings are often surrounded by flatterers and ambitious nobles. A wife's voice, if trusted, can be the only honest one. History shows us examples. Eleanor of Aquitaine advised both Louis VII and Henry II, her words shaping wars and treaties. Margaret of Anjou influenced Henry VI, becoming leader during his bouts of illness. Isabella of France eventually orchestrated rebellion against Edward II. Not every princess reached such heights, but many quietly steered decisions behind the throne. Her greatest influence comes through her children. She oversees the nursery, ensuring her sons are raised in proper faith and discipline. She chooses tutors, shaping the education of future kings. She arranges marriages, binding her daughters to powerful houses. Her touch extends into the next generation. Through her children, her voice echoes into the future. And as long as she remains mother of heirs, her survival is a political necessity. This gives her leverage. Few dare to slight the woman who bore the king's children. With status secured, the princess can carve out moments of true agency. She may negotiate with nobles, offering her favor in exchange for loyalty. She may serve as regent when her husband is absent in war. Overseeing justice and treasury, she may sponsor artists, shaping the culture of her court. She may intervene in disputes, softening her husband's harsher decisions. These acts, though often invisible in chronicles, ripple outward. They remind us that influence is not always loud, but steady. Blanche of Castile, 1188 to 1252, mother of Louis IX of France. She ruled as regent, exercising direct authority with wisdom and severity. Margaret of Anjou, 1430 to 1482, became de facto ruler during Henry VI's madness, leading armies in the Wars of the Roses. Eleanor of Aquitaine, 1122 to 1204, beyond marriage, she became one of the most powerful women of the Middle Ages, mothering 10 children who shaped Europe. These women show that a princess, once mother, could rise beyond pawn to play a dot. Yet her power is always fragile. If her husband dies, her influence may vanish, her dower land stripped, her children taken. If she fails to produce heirs, her status crumbles. If she is accused of adultery, real or fabricated, her reputation collapses. Her influence exists only within narrow margins. One misstep, one stroke of bad fortune, can undo years of endurance. This fragility keeps her cautious. Every smile is calculated, every word weighed, every alliance tested. How does she feel, living with influence but without freedom? Pride, perhaps, at shaping her children, her court, her charities. Satisfaction in being respected after years of suspicion. Relief in knowing she has secured her position. But also fear, always fear. Fear of losing her children to illness. Fear of falling from grace if her husband grows cold. Fear of gossip, of slander, of the endless churn of court politics. Her life is not peace, but balance, a tightrope walk over chaos. So, what was status and influence for a medieval princess? It was not sovereignty, not autonomy. It was fragile, conditional, dependent on her womb, her husband, her children. And yet, within those confines, she carved power. Through charity, she touched the poor. Through books, she shaped culture. Through her husband, she guided politics. Through her children, she influenced the future. Her influence was narrow, but it was real. It was the flame she protected in the storm, flickering but unextinguished. And in that flame, we see resilience. We see survival. We see the truth. Even in a gilded cage, a princess could stretch her wings, if only a little. A medieval princess lived within contradictions. On the surface, she was powerless, her marriage arranged, her body controlled, her children demanded, her life directed by men. Yet, within those very chains, she found ways to act. Her agency was not the kind we celebrate today: bold independence, open resistance, sweeping reforms. Instead, it was quieter, subtler, and often invisible to chroniclers, but it was real. It was the power of survival, of influence, carved out in whispers and small acts. This paradox defines her life: outward obedience, inward strategy. One of the most remarkable skills of medieval princesses was the ability to wear obedience like a mask, to bow when commanded, to kneel when required, to smile when ordered, all while thinking, planning, enduring. Obedience became performance. She learned that appearing compliant kept suspicion at bay. Behind lowered eyes, her mind worked. Behind folded hands, her will persisted. Her world demanded submission, but within submission, she concealed resilience. Consider the still room, where herbs were dried, medicines brewed, perfumes mixed. On the surface, this was women's work, insignificant compared to politics. But here, the princess discovered agency. She learned which herbs soothed fevers, which oils calmed nerves, which poultices eased childbirth. She applied them to her ladies, her children, sometimes even to her husband. Knowledge was power, and in this small chamber she possessed it. She could heal, she could comfort, she could command respect. The still room became her domain, the laboratory of influence. Agency also emerged in relationships. Amid gossiping ladies and watchful servants, she learned to cultivate loyalty. A kind word, a secret gift, a shared prayer could bind another woman to her side. With these allies, she built networks. One lady might defend her against slander. Another might carry messages discreetly. A governess might guard her children fiercely. In a world where open defiance was impossible, alliances were survival. Her friendships became armor, her allies her hidden court. For some princesses, books became a doorway to agency. Though denied the chance to rule outright, they found freedom in study. They read psalms, histories, romances. They collected manuscripts, sponsored translations, employed scribes. Through learning, they carved a place for themselves as patrons of culture, remembered not only as wives or mothers, but as women of intellect. This intellectual agency shaped legacies. Libraries they founded endured beyond their lifetimes. Ideas they preserved rippled into future generations. Perhaps the most enduring form of agency was motherhood. A princess might have little voice in her own life, but she could shape the lives of her children. She chose their tutors, whispered values into their ears, shielded them from hostile factions. A boy raised by a strong mother carried her lessons. To the throne, a daughter taught resilience, carried it into her own marriage, through her children. The princess extended her agency into the future. History offers glimpses of this quiet power. Blanche of Castile, mother of Louis IX, shaped his reign through discipline and piety, ruling as regent with authority. Margaret Beaufort, mother of Henry VII, maneuvered politically during the Wars of the Roses, her persistence laying the foundation for the Tudor dynasty. Eleanor of Provence, Queen of England, wielded soft power through patronage of poets and artists, shaping cultural life at court. These women did not escape patriarchy. They worked within it, bending its structures just enough to make space for themselves. But agency came at a cost. Any misstep invited ruin. Too bold, and she risked being labeled ambitious, dangerous, even traitorous. Too passive, and she faded into obscurity, forgotten even by her children. The balance was delicate. A princess walked a narrow line, carving agency quietly, always under threat. This fragility makes her endurance more striking. She did not wield armies, she wielded endurance, intelligence, and subtlety. Looking back, it is easy to ask, why did she not rebel? Why did she not demand freedom? The truth is that freedom, as we imagine it, did not exist for women in her world. The structures of family, church, and state pressed too heavily. Rebellion would have meant death, exile, or erasure. And yet, within those structures, she found ways to live, to endure, to leave marks on history. Her story reminds us that progress is not born only of grand revolutions. It is also born of survival, of the quiet persistence of women who lived, endured, and shaped the world in ways chroniclers rarely admitted. Imagine her at night, candles burned low, her children asleep in their cradles. She sits by the window, the cold air drifting in, a book in her lap. She whispers prayers not for power, but for strength. She thinks of the path her life has taken, chosen for her, endured by her. And yet she also feels pride. She has survived childbirth. She has won respect. She has carved influence. She has not been erased. Her agency is not loud, not obvious, but it is hers. And in claiming it, however quietly, she becomes more than pawn. She becomes person. So what do we see when we reflect on women's agency in the medieval world? We see that agency was not absent, but hidden. Not loud, but quiet. Not revolutionary, but resilient. Princesses carved space in the cracks of a patriarchal system, finding influence in motherhood, in learning, in charity, in whispered alliances. Their power was fragile, their freedom limited, and yet they endured. They preserved culture, shaped heirs, steered courts, and whispered their strength into the future. The fairy tale forgets this. It paints princesses as passive maidens waiting for rescue. The truth is richer. They were survivors, strategists, quiet architects of history. Their agency lay not in escaping their gilded cages, but in making those cages bearable, even meaningful. And in doing so, they lit small flames of change that over centuries grew into fire. The story we have walked together is not one of fairy tales. It is not glass slippers, golden crowns, or happily ever afters. It is the story of a young woman born into duty, shaped by discipline, traded in marriage, tested by childbirth, bound by faith, and remembered in ways she could not control. Her castle was a fortress, but also a prison. Her education was rigorous, but designed for obedience. Her marriage was alliance, not choice. Her journey abroad was rupture, not adventure. Her court was dazzling, but suffocating. Her childbirth was triumph, but also terror. Her influence was real, but fragile. Her faith was comfort, but also control. Her legacy was uncertain, but enduring. This is the truth of medieval princess life, not fantasy, but survival. Not romance, but resilience. The metaphor of the gilded cage fits perfectly. The princess's life glittered from afar. Two peasants outside the castle walls. Her gowns, jewels, and ceremonies seemed divine. To us today, her titles and marriages appear glamorous, but inside she was caged. The bars of her cage were made of stone walls. Arranged marriages, constant surveillance, endless duty. The gilding was her gowns, her feasts, her crown. From the outside, the gold shone. From the inside, it was still confinement. And yet, even in cages, birds sing. The princess found ways to live, to endure, to influence. She carved meaning from suffering, power from obedience, legacy from survival. What stands out most across her story is resilience. She endured cold, filth, vermin in her castle. She endured strict lessons, punishments, endless correction. She endured a marriage chosen. For her, a husband who may have been stranger or tyrant. She endured seasickness, loneliness, scrutiny in foreign lands. She endured childbirth, screaming, bleeding, praying for survival. She endured gossip, court intrigue, betrayal. She endured faith twisted into chains. And still she lived. Still she prayed. Still she raised children, built chapels, stitched tapestries, sponsored books, shaped futures. Her power was not in overthrowing the system, but in surviving it, in finding agency where none was offered, in making endurance itself an act of quiet defiance. But we cannot soften the fear. It was constant fear of sin, fear of her father's anger, fear of her husband's coldness, fear of failing to bear sons, fear of childbirth, fear of scandal, fear of hell. This fear shaped her every choice. It silenced her voice, bent her body, pressed her spirit, and yet it did not erase her. Fear surrounded her, but it did not consume her. In surviving fear, she discovered courage. For centuries, the voices of these women were silenced. Chroniclers mocked them as ambitious or erased them as irrelevant. Histories praised their husbands, fathers, sons, while reducing them to wombs, dowries, or scandals. This silence is itself part of their legacy. Their stories were stolen, reshaped, forgotten, but silence is not absence. Their lives left marks. In children who ruled, in chapels they founded, in manuscripts they preserved, in whispers of nuns, servants, and peasants who remembered them with affection today. By piecing together records, objects, and echoes, we give them back a voice. What can we learn from these women, so far removed from us in time? Comfort is not the same as freedom. A princess lived in castles, wore jewels, dined on silver, but her lack of choice made her life harsher than many peasants. Freedom is worth more than gold. Agency exists even in oppression. Though bound by duty, princesses carved spaces of influence through charity, motherhood, learning. They remind us that power takes many forms. Memory is fragile. Their stories warn us that women's contributions are easily erased. We must preserve and amplify women's voices today so they do not vanish tomorrow. Resilience inspires. These women endured fear, loneliness, and constant control. Their survival is testament to human endurance and to the quiet strength that shapes history even without open rebellion. Picture her one last time. The princess sits in her chamber. The rushes crackle underfoot. The fire smolders weakly, the air heavy with incense. Outside, courtiers whisper, nobles plot, servants bustle. But for a moment, she is alone. On the table before her, a single candle burns. She watches its flame, fragile, flickering, but steady. That flame is her life. Threatened by drafts of duty, gusts of fear, winds of politics, but unextinguished, it burns for her children. It burns for her faith. It burns for herself. And, centuries later, it still burns in the stories we tell, in the memory we restore. The fairy tales gave us princesses of beauty, romance, and rescue. History gives us women of endurance, resilience, and quiet power. Their gilded cages could not erase their humanity. Their fear could not erase their strength. Their silence could not erase their legacy. They endured, they influenced, they remembered, and now, so do we.